The Center for Human Systems presents the Leadership in Self-Mastery program. This is Course 2, Shaping Human Systems, Module 1, Their Importance.
Welcome to the Shaping Human Systems course in the Leadership and Self-Mastery program. This series is for leaders at all levels to master the behaviors, practices, and disciplines of leadership. My name is Ronnie Gill, and I'm here with Michael Broom, whose organizational development expertise is at the center of these programs. Michael, today we're going to talk about human systems. So tell me, what's the big idea about human systems?
Hello, Ronnie. How are you doing today?
Good.
Super. Well, human systems is a new term for many, yet we are all members of human systems. The teams we own at work, the families of which we are a part, the friends we hang out with are all human systems. Human systems, not individuals, are the driving force of change in human society. This is fascinating. Margaret Mead said it really well. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that has. The same is true in organizations. Unfortunately, in our society, human systems change individuals more than individuals change human systems. That's because we don't see or understand them, and we need to, particularly leaders need to.
So you say we don't see or understand human systems. Why is that?
Well, we live in a Western society that was founded on the principle of individualism, with its idea of individual independence and self-reliance. We see individuals as being the fundamental unit of human society, yet nothing could be further from the truth. That perception has been so pervasive for so long that we neither see nor understand human systems. Hence, they wind up managing us rather than we managing them. When we can understand human systems, then we can begin to manage them.
So what I really liked about what you had to say about human systems being the driving force of change is that we're so used to these stories of leaders making change. And it's refreshing and challenging to think it's the human systems that are the driving force of change and not just any one individual. So I feel like you really haven't fully defined a human system, at least for me. And so maybe you can give us a succinct definition of a human system.
Sure. A human system is any group of people who interact together towards some goal, and in that process, impact each other and the group as a whole. Think organizations, think teams, think work units, think families, groups of friends.
So why is an understanding of human systems important for leaders?
Well, there are 4 reasons. Actually, we've already mentioned one, but we'll go over them. Number 1, as a leader, your human system or human systems of followers will determine how difficult or easy your job will be. Number 2, the members of a human system, including the leader, will consistently succeed or fail only with the support of a critical mass of the system. Number 3, human systems are synergistic, which can be positive or negative. Now, that's a new idea for many, that synergism can be negative, but we'll talk about that later. Number 4, members of human systems have a strong tendency to conform to existing norms, whether they are functional or dysfunctional, to the point where it can overwhelm the normal behavior and values.
Okay, so the first point that you made is that human systems can get in the way of a leader's success. Can you say more about that?
Sure. Leaders are nothing without their followers. My definition of leadership is pretty simple and straightforward. Leaders need some place to go and people willing to follow. So if no one is following you, you are not leading anywhere. And those followers cannot be just a bunch of unconnected, uncoordinated individuals. Leaders must have a group of people who are aligned and coordinated and integrated into a cohesive whole, which is another great definition of a human system. So first, we must understand that individual members of a human system, including the leader, will consistently succeed or fail only with the support of that human system. No bunch of individuals operating independently will effectively support you as a leader.
Okay, so that's a great theory. Can you give us a couple of examples of human systems at work?
Actually,
or not at work, or human systems that don't work?
Actually, you said it's a theory, but actually it's a fact. Yeah.
Okay.
So got two examples of leaders wanting to get some change done without an understanding of human systems. Let's talk about Fran Skubik first. She was leading a team that hadn't met a deadline within a week for the past 6 months. And her boss was really getting impatient about it because she had a history of meeting deadlines. To do something about it, she had repeatedly met with each individual team member to try to figure out what the problem was. 3 of those team members pointed to the same person that she thought of as being the source of the problem. So she thinks she has a solution. So she got rid of him. In spite of that, her team continued to miss deadlines. She did not understand human systems and their synergistic nature. So she was not able to see what was happening. In such cases, leaders tend to fall back to what they know, which is the mechanical approach of trying to locate the faulty component, then fixing it or replacing it. So in teams, you'll see people get scapegoated for the dysfunction of an entire team, or worse yet, fired, as what happened in Fran's case. Several times I've been asked to help with an intractable problem where someone has already been fired, and I just cringe, God, if you'd only called me in sooner. Most seemingly intractable issues in teams, organizations, or families, those are all human systems issues. And they only seem intractable because no one involved is familiar with the facts and understanding of human systems. The systems problem that Fran's team had was the finger pointing that had become habitual. It had become a norm after the first deadline was missed, where folks started saying, Sam's issue was this, or Jane's issue caused it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If she could have fixed the systemic problem of that norm, she could have solved her lateness problem. Instead, so much energy was going into finger pointing and blaming that people just weren't getting the work done in a timely fashion.
Yeah, and I think we call those energy sponges, if I recall that from an earlier session.
Yes, we do, from the Conscious Use of Self course.
That's right. So you brought out a lot of interesting points here that I think are important to recap. First of all, that Fran's team was not meeting deadlines and not supporting Fran as a leader, not making her successful as a result. Her team was not following her. And the second thing is she fired one person who seemed to be the problem. She scapegoated, the whole team did. But that wasn't really the problem at all because the critical mass of people were not aligned to meeting the team's goals. So
they were all aligned at not getting blamed for what was going on.
Okay.
Yeah.
They had the wrong alignment.
You got it.
South Pole instead of North Pole kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it was, in number 3, it was fundamentally a negative synergistic team. They were kind of feeding off of each other's negative energy. And I know we're going to talk about synergy later on. And number 4, it had a set of group norms around blaming and finger pointing and just not speaking up around the larger problems at hand or whatever they were upset about. They just blamed. So that sounds like a royal mess, in my opinion. But
It was.
and I'm hoping that you sorted them out.
Of course.
Of course you did.
It's what I do.
It's what you do. So that's a team. So let's talk about larger human systems, like at the organizational level. How does that play out?
Sure. Let's also say that in this course, you will learn how to sort these kinds of issues out once we get a deeper understanding of human systems, and particularly when we get to the 3rd module, it really is focused on managing change in problematic human systems. Okay, back to a larger human system. Okay, so let's talk about a leader that wants to change the culture of the entire organization. Consider the new CEO. Oh, what was this guy's name? I think his name was Frank James or something like that. He wanted to shift his organization that had been historically autocratic to one that was much more participative. I have been asked to get involved in these situations several times. Frank had taken over his mother's broadcasting company when she retired. And Frank was busy doing all the things that he had learned from his business school education in terms of installing a new culture. He held meetings in each of the areas of his organization about a better way to manage, a better way to get work done if we all work together. He brought in training programs in participative management. That word always doesn't want to come out of my mouth right. And he talked constantly with his senior executives, several of which were his mother's age and had been with her for a long time. Yet, in spite of all that, when he did his year-end climate survey, it was clear that nothing much had changed, not even at the executive level. He was beyond puzzled. He was pissed. Clearly, in his mind, his senior executives were holding up the progress that he wanted, even after having scolded them several times, which actually was making the problem worse. When I talked to his senior executives, some were upset, and some thought it was ironic that having been scolded, they were seeing Frank the same kind of modern autocratic leader that his mother was. Most of his leaders said that they had actually tried involving their folks in more of the decision-making processes. But then most of them just wanted to be told what to do, just like it had always been. Frank's speeches, emails, training programs just were not doing much at all to change this culture that was just steeped in passivity. Stories of people getting fired for not doing what they were told was so plentiful that changing anything seemed too risky other than doing what you were told to do. That was the way to stay safe. Frank had a human systems problem. And he had never heard of human systems before in his life.
So what exactly was his human systems problem? Was it just passivity and unwillingness to take risks due to autocratic behavior from leaders?
You hit the nail on the head, Ronnie.
Okay.
That was it. Until he could begin to change that, then nothing was going to shift.
Okay. So let's go ahead.
It's just, so many organizations think that communication and training programs are going to change culture, but neither one of those get at the human systems issue. So let's move on.
I'm dying to ask you then, and I know it's off topic, but then what does change culture? Can you just give us a little snippet?
Just a little snippet. Building a critical mass of support for the change you're after. But of course, if you can't even see the systems problem, then you can't even start to build that critical mass of support to make that change. So Frank and his folks could not see that. The problem was the passivity that was in the system.
Okay.
He could not see that people being participative felt like a big risk to them. And people who had taken risks before did not fare very well.
Got it. Thank you. Let's move to your second item. You say that individual members of a system will consistently succeed or fail only with the support of the system.
Yes. Okay. So let's look at the issue of organizational deadwood.
Okay.
I've been in so many organizations where people complained about the people who were there who were essentially not performing very well, were not supporting the goals of the organization. These are the people who have retired on the job. They're not pulling their weight. They're people who, as they work less, causes other people to have to work more. A lot of people have heard the phrase that when that happens, that the people who work less get rewarded with even less work, and the people who work hard get punished with even more work. Yeah. Now, so these people who are dead wood can only maintain their employment because their organizations, their human system allows them to. The problem is a systems problem where neither the Slack employees are not held accountable for their poor operational performance, nor are their managers who are not being held accountable for their poor managerial performance. That is what allows deadwood to continue to be deadwood. Deadwood needs to either come alive or they need to get moved on. In these organizations, there are no consequences for their actions or inactions. The system has actually, if tacitly, condoned and accepted such poor performance that no one really wants. It's fascinating.
Can I just interject here, because I have worked in many such organizations where someone was always perceived as deadwood,
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps scapegoated as deadwood, I would say, So, and I think the larger, you say the larger issue is managers are not managing, but then you could say the larger organizational issue is the organization doesn't know how to set standards for managing. And so you get into like you start peeling back the onion, and there's several layers going on here.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, how do you, on one hand, we're talking about people as deadwood. Previously, we talked about people that were scapegoated. How do you know when like Fran fired a person because he was perceived to be a problem? I guess what I'm trying to how do you determine when someone's deadwood and the issue is managerial, people aren't managing, versus when it's something else?
If the issue is persistent.
Okay.
If only one person is doing it, it's really not a systems issue.
Okay.
In organizations with dead wood, you can generally count the dead
That's
wood.
right.
That they are kind of floating around lots of different places.
That's right.
And the accountability issue, sometimes is not a question of there aren't standards. It's just that the standards are not being enforced. So it's the accountability issue or the lack of accountability issue that I see mostly as the problem. Now, there are some cases that I've been in where they had good technical standards, but they did not have good standards in terms of support for the teams that they were on, for the human system they're on, because everything is focused on individuals.
Right.
Even the organizations who constantly talk about that they are team-based.
Yes.
Because if you notice, their reward system is for individuals, but not teams.
You got it.
Fascinating. Yes.
All right.
All right. I see this issue mostly in organizations, or maybe I can say only in organizations that have either become highly bureaucratic or wealthy to the point that they can afford the loss of productivity. That's a paper I'll write one day.
And what will you call this paper, Michael?
The syndrome of the wealthy organization.
Okay.
And yes, bureaucratic organizations are wealthy. That's the only way they can afford to be bureaucratic. Now, we don't generally think of government agencies as being wealthy, but they are based on our tax dollars.
Okay.
Now, of course, the other side of the coin is also true, that for an employee to consistently succeed, that also can only happen with the support of the organization. Employees who are consistently promoted and get better assignments do so only with the support of the organization as a human system. Those were the people who were certainly given the information, the feedback, and the opportunities needed for success. The humans supported them and made them successful. And I've also seen it happen when the human system decides to support their dead wood, they stop being dead wood. Yes.
Great. I was just reflecting on what you were saying about, the employees that succeed only do so with the support of the human system. And I'm thinking a lot about the diversity inclusion initiatives that you see out there in the world. And that really is a lot of them around mentorship and sponsorship are saying, hey, this group of people have not been supported by the system. So let's address that core systems issue. So I never thought about diversity and inclusion as a human systems issue, but it's very much that.
Diversity and inclusion is definitely a human systems issue, and that's why some organizations have stopped just doing diversity training, that they really have to look at what's going on in their organization that is maintaining the problem, even in the human resources departments, where just to get past the screens, there's an underlying syndrome of you better be behaving or looking like or sounding like you are supposed to sound, and going to the same schools that all the other successful people in the organization have gone to. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Diversity, inclusion issues, clearly a systemic issue.
Agreed. So I want to go back to a term that you've mentioned several times, synergy. You've talked about it. You've mentioned it. Can you say more about synergy and what it is?
Sure. This is our third point, I think. Human systems are synergistic, and that synergy can be either positive or negative. Synergy is normally seen as the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. A more technical definition would say that the behavior of a system cannot be predicted by an examination of its diverse individual parts. So let's look at positive synergy first. If you had all of the internal parts of your cell phone spread out on a table, you would not have a cell phone. You would just have a bunch of parts of a cell phone. It would not be a cell phone until it is put together in such a manner that all of those different parts work well together. That is the positive synergy, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. A cell phone and any machine, in fact, is by its nature synergistic. The machines that human beings make are systems that are intentionally designed to be positively synergistic. Components working together to make something that is greater than the sum of its parts. And even some of our machines can fall into negative synergy. Consider the cell phones that have suddenly burst into flames, or a computer with a virus. Suddenly, the whole has become less than the sum of its parts.
Okay.
Now, consider the human systems that invented the cell phone. The sum of each of the talented individuals operating independently could not have produced a cell phone to save their lives. But as an integrated, coordinated team with a clear focus, they invented the cell phone. That is positive synergy in action.
Okay. That's a great example, a great analogy for thinking about synergy and how synergy works and kind of making the whole more than the sum of the parts. I think it's helpful, even though it's a mechanicistic or mechanical example. And it's an example of a machine.
Yes, a system. But a system is a system, whether it's a human system or a mechanical system.
Okay. So let's talk about negative synergy in human systems. How does that show up in our workplace?
Oh, sure. This is one of my fun ones. I use this example all the time. Consider the weekly meetings, or maybe they're bi-weekly or monthly, that everybody loves to hate. We hate them because they are such a waste of time. Maybe one or two people dominate the meetings. Maybe clear decisions are not being reached. Good decisions are discarded. Ego-based power struggles are constant. Regardless of the poison, the waste of time and energy is enormous. I routinely am asked to work with such groups. I interview each member. Every last one is intelligent. They all want the team to work. They want the team to produce good results. And for the most part, they even like each other to varying degrees. Yet when they get together as a whole, they produce less than the desired results. That is the negative synergy, where the whole is less than the sum of its parts. You know, this is unfortunately a rampant problem. A Harvard Business Review article documents that 75%, that's a huge number, of cross-functional teams are dysfunctional. A University of Phoenix study found that 95%, now that's another bigger number, of employees think that teams are important to organizations. Unfortunately, 68%, that's almost as much as 75%, of them said that the teams that they have been on have been dysfunctional. Just an additional piece for you. A Gallup poll has found that 87% of employees worldwide are not engaged. Now, how in the world can you have a successful team, a successful human system, when 85% of employees are disengaged? That number just is amazing to me. I do know that it says worldwide, because I don't think a company in this country could survive with only 13 or 23% of their people. No, that's 13% of their people being fully engaged. Anyway, such is the result of negative synergy in human systems, the teams in our workplaces. A strong leader is able to turn negative synergy into positive synergy, or suffer the grievous loss of productivity that seems rampant.
Michael, may I make an observation? Because as I have belonged to a lot of organizations, and I'm currently working with an organization that has endless meetings that are really just to keep everyone informed about what's going on. Whereas if people had actually paid attention in the meeting that told everyone what was going on, they wouldn't need to have a meeting to find out what was going on. So a lot of energy is spent, especially in cross-functional teams, keeping people aligned. So I guess that's just an observation. I don't know if you have anything to say about that. It's really hard in these matrixed organizations to keep everyone dancing to the same tune.
Sure. I don't know about that particular organization, but often when I see what you have described, what is often going on is that in the meetings, people are being told things. Yeah, information is being shared without much discussion. People do not hold on to information that they are simply told.
Okay.
Memos, or these days, emails, do not stick in people's minds. If you want somebody to be sure somebody really understands, really gets it, and is going to do it, you need to have conversations, not just telling. So this is the project I am working on. These are the issues that I'm having. What do you think about that? Can you give me some support about that? So turn it into a conversation. Just
right.
Sharing information by itself is not enough.
Well, and the conversation ensures that if there is a required participation in the conversation, it ensures that people are actually paying attention. Whereas people who remain silent, it gets problematic in that way.
Yeah, well, they're often on their cell phones.
That's right.
Yeah. But
doing their email
conversation stops that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the final, I want to go back to your list of 4 items. The final point was about conformity to group norms. Why? And I guess I have a burning question. Why do people conform to group norms even if they can clearly see the norms are dysfunctional?
Oh, this is fascinating. Yeah, it is such an important question. Culture, organizational culture, social culture, norms of groups and teams are the stable, consistent, and persistent patterns of human systems. It does not matter if the culture and norms are functional or dysfunctional. They will continue to be stable, consistent, and persistent in spite of their dysfunction. Culture and norms resist change from individual efforts unless they're dealt with on a system level. Let's look a little deeper into this. Let's look at how most people enter into a new situation. They tend to do it quietly to scope out what is everybody else doing? What are the prevailing norms so that they do not transgress them? Even new leaders do the same as they, as they say that they want to familiarize themselves with their organization and the people in it. What they don't realize that as they are familiarizing themselves, they're also being seduced into behaving the same way. Anyone who comes in with radical behavior, and this is the crux of the problem, radical behavior is behavior that is too different from the norms, from the current culture, is likely to be labeled not a culture fit or something of that sort. They are denied support and advancement if they're not simply expelled forthwith. Even a new leader must not come in with too many new ideas too early if they want the cooperation that they need to succeed. People are not consciously making the decision to collude with troublesome norms. This is another reason why conscious use of self is so important, particularly for leaders. If people were actually conscious about what they were doing, maybe they would be doing something a little bit different.
Or they may be conscious about it, but it's not safe to articulate it.
And it's not in their own minds. Now, in truth, it could be perfectly safe,
right.
but nobody else is doing it, so it feels unsafe. Yeah, and I am working with such a group. People, folks say, well, it's not safe here. And well, what would happen if you did speak up? And they'll tell me about some incident that happened 5 years ago.
Well, I find that it often happens. I remember trying to bring in people, to hire people who had a different mindset, but also looked different. And that just, and I'm not talking about just visible differences, the way they, it was visible in the sense it was the way they dressed or the way they carried themselves. And that was just too much for the organization to bear. And
it's visible. It's how people think. It's the whole 9 yards. It's what makes diversity such a problem. You can bring in all kinds of different people, but the culture wants to smush them all into the same way of thinking, which throws all the diversity out the window. So the group may even look colorful and genderful, but to get there, you had to conform to think like everybody else. Yeah.
All right. So if you're brought in to change things, to change these behaviors, how do you do that?
A strong leader first must withstand the seduction of existing dysfunctional norms. First of all, he or she has to see them. If they can't even see them, they will find themselves colluding with the dysfunction and becoming part of the problem. Now, while they withstand the seduction, at the same time, they must not stray too far from existing norms until they've built sufficient internal support. Here's an example of how the seduction works. I've heard numerous stories of a new person joining a team, performing at a high level, and then was counseled by peers to slow down because it was making them look bad. Fascinating.
Well, I actually have an example of I was asked to, I was told, oh, that looks too good. You created something that looks too professional. So you need to
back it off. Yeah.
Back it off. And I'm like, all right.
This is crazy. Yes. I also remember working with the head of a large medical practice that had what looked like, on the surface, a beautiful culture of mutual love where everybody liked everyone, except no one would say anything bad about anyone, and that caused the problem. Anyone new to the organization quickly learned to conform. The problem was that this intended culture was prohibiting anyone from offering or getting any constructive feedback. Even a mention that so-and-so wasn't doing very well with some tasks was met with, well, her mother isn't doing very well and her dog just died or something like that. They were working from the unspoken agreement, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. the dysfunction was beginning to pile up, where they were outbursts of aggression and hostility, and that's how I got called in. How to get rid of such dysfunctional norms in culture is what we will explore in depth in Culture 3. The seductive strength of culture and norms is based in our psychological need to belong. Consider that belonging is just barely above the physiological and safety needs in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Some psychologists, including myself, see belonging as a safety need for many people, making it an even stronger motivator. We go along to get along, for better or for worse. Leaving even a dysfunctional team or organization is difficult for this very same reason. There are similar examples outside of work. People stay in abusive relationships for just such reasons. On the positive side, functional cultures and norms will also seduce their new members into conforming to their great functionality. That's a blessing for new leaders to an organization. I rarely get called into such organizations.
That's right. You get called in to fix things, not.
Amen.
All right.
Where there's pain.
So I think you know, so we're coming to the end of this part of the module, and I just wanted to just recap some things for people. First of all, you said all of us belong to human systems of one type or another, be they families, teams, or organizations. And that's a strong psychological need for a lot of us, is to belong. And there are 4 things that leaders need to understand about human systems. That human systems are more than just you as an individual leader. Human systems will determine your success or failure as a leader. So understanding these systems is crucial. And that members of a human system, so number 2 is that members of a human system consistently succeed or fail only with the support of a critical mass of the system. And then we talked about synergy. Human systems are synergistic. That synergy can be positive or negative. And when it's positive, these amazing things can happen and there can be incredible productivity. And I remember teams I've been a part of that were just incredibly amazing. And I just, was thrilled to go to work every day and just be completely energized in their presence. And I was a part of that. And so such incredible productivity can come from synergy. And that's what a lot of startups look for, right? And the 4th thing is that human systems have a very strong tendency to conform to existing cultural norms, which is great if it's a positive human system and not so great if it's not. And, and I think that you said something really interesting. And as a part of that is that if you come in and you see dysfunction and you immediately start to try changing it without the support that you need, either from the leader, especially, or from other members of the team to make that change, which requires a lot of conversations sometimes, then what's going to happen is the system is going to push you out or push back on you very is going to push back on you. So anyways, well, thank you for that overview. That was very helpful about what human systems
are. Well, I thank you for that overview. It was very helpful.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to pause here and before we go on to the exercise.
This is the end of part 1 of this module. Please continue on to part 2 for an exercise where you can follow along step by step to apply the concepts covered for yourself. Pause the recording if you need more time. For questions you would like to ask Dr. Broom or comments you want to share, use the forum, but watch the exercise first.